In this next Fireside Chat and our last of the day, I'm excited to sit down with Jerome Foster II. He is an environmental justice activist and a social entrepreneur who at age 18 became the youngest member to advise the White House by joining the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and he's gone on to do so many great things. Please welcome him to the stage with a huge round of applause. I have to say that I feel like Jerome and I are old friends. We met last week at the Natural Food Products Expo West in California and had such a great conversation. And I want to thank you for that, because I think you inspired so many young people in the audience with what you have been able to do. And I know that connecting social and environmental activism to the arts is something so central to the work that you do with Wake Up and just sort of your whole being in the world. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, first, it's good to see you again from Expo West. Being here in Austin, Texas with the incredible Texans and everyone flying out here and traveling here today to be able to listen to really nuanced conversations around food and intersectionality. I think for me, being able to speak here from a perspective of a younger generation feels quite inspiring to be able to see how many people are open to listen to young people and open to figure out how we can work together in climate solutions. But I first got involved through climate activism in Washington, D.C. I was born and raised in Southeast D.C. And I constantly saw protests in my backyard and around me. And before that, I was always fascinated by, in referencing the last panel of the NASA propulsion engineer, about astrophysics. Because I saw when I was very young, my dad made the intentional effort to expose me to the TV show Cosmos by Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he was a black man who was a scientist and was telling really nuanced stories about how humanity relates to nature. And that feeling of looking up at the stars, knowing that I have a real sense of respect for a galaxy I've never visited and know nothing about. Yeah. But when I look back at my own planet and I look at the trees and I look at nature, that sense of reverence and that sense of respect isn't commonly viewed amongst everyday people. We don't have that same sense of awe when we walk around, even this garden or this city.
Sure.
And I think that's what has fueled me to my work today is making sure that every single person knows that nature is something that deserves respect and deserves for us to be able to have access to it, and that we should have a society, an economy, a culture which builds that into how we think about how we operate in the world.
Yeah, and what I like about you, one of the many things I like about you, Jerome, is that you've used that reverence for nature into a vehicle for organizing, which, we've been talking about, Raj Patel brought it up, organizing and resistance to some of the terrible things that are going on in the world. Can you talk about that? Yes.
Being at the generation where we've seen climate impacts from a very young age, it feels like there's a real need for importance for us to see climate action happening, not just from a perspective of technology and science, but of equity and humanity. And I think that's where a lot of the environmental action that isn't happening today has to scale, is that when we think about how we are investing in solar panels and wind turbines, we have to make sure that communities of color, communities of low income, which are predominantly exposed to the clustering of fossil fuel and petrochemical plants in their neighborhood, for us to say, well, we can't just put a solar panel on this and say it's done. We have to go back decades and say these communities are overburdened by the fact that they have a plastic mine, a plastic facility in their backyard. And for us, it's about making sure that we stop, one, the continual expansion of fossil fuels in communities, and two, ensuring that we're scaling the solutions that are here. Every day we go on social media, we go in the news, and we read about headlines of a sustainable future that's right around the corner, but it's about investing in them, and it's about making sure that we are doing everything we can to volunteer our time, volunteer our expertise, to make sure that these solutions meet the moment of the climate crisis. And it's thinking about how those things intersect with communities that we're really going to have the long-term solutions to the climate crisis, so we aren't back here another 100 years from now or 200 years from now. It's because our thinking wasn't holistic enough to think of all of the externalities that we may not have thought about today.
Meeting the moment is something that you've done so well. At this moment in time, a lot of people are disillusioned, they're exhausted, they're worried. How do you keep the momentum going so that we don't lose? You're right, we do have this one moment right now to make real change. How do we keep it going?
Yeah, for me, like, and a lot of young people I talk to, like, I was a kid who, in DC, climate striked for 80 weeks in front of the White House. Like, I had a sign, I went out there with a megaphone that I, like, borrowed from one of my friends, and I was like, let's yell to the White House to see if anyone hears me. And it doesn't matter who's in that office, I know someone's listening.
Right.
And after that, and after doing that for 80 weeks, I heard from the administration, the new administration that had came into power, and I was appointed to the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. But the thing is, it wasn't just me that was a part of that. There was 70 years of community organizers and researchers and people who would be impacted by the climate crisis firsthand that were a part of that.
Yeah.
And that's what's exciting is that, for me, like 80 weeks before that, they would never have thought to have a young person. If it wasn't for 5 young people going out and climate striking in Sweden, turning into tens of millions of people that had no money, no social impact or influence, they just said, we're going to use our voices in any way we can, and we're going to change the culture. And that's what's happened. 87% of the world knows about the climate crisis. They are aware of it, and they know that we have to do something. It's about making sure that our economy reflects that change, and it's about making sure that our politics reflects that. Because they're completely unresponsive to any needs or concerns that we have at the moment. If we say we need to plant 500 million trees in the next decade, which is something that has been stated by many scientists and researchers that we have to do, and go to Congress and have mass mobilization and marches, our political system is not responsive to that in the way that we need it to be. We have to make sure that we continue to use our unique and creative ways to raise ruckus and and to disrupt the status quo, because protesting isn't the only way to make change. It's by making sure that we're volunteering. It's by putting our dollars where we're spending and spending our time. It's about all the things that we don't think about that really changes the way that our planet functions. Yeah,
I love that you said raising a ruckus. When I left Expo West last week, I heard from a lot of people on social media and in my email how inspiring you were to them, and how they left that conversation feeling a lot better than they did, the day before. And I think that's something that you are very unique at doing. You inspire people, you activate them, you are able to give them the tools that they need to go forward and do the activism that you have been doing for so long. What is your advice to young people in the audience and who are watching about how to get involved in this work and feel powerful?
Yeah, so one piece of advice I would give to young people or anyone who is interested in getting deeper involved, it's to, I joined as an ambassador for American Forest last year, and I've seen the incredible work that, I saw a panel earlier today talking about how they had food forests, and about how we're able to bring communities together. It's looking to each other and saying, what unique skill or passion do I have that I can bring to the table? But it's also in taking that next step and saying, what nonprofit, what NGO do I know in my community that I can put my time towards? But it's also even taking another step forward of saying, it's thinking, how do we teach our children? How do we teach our educators? How do we teach the people that are structurally in charge of the institutions that we engage with to know that solutions aren't just in trial period, that they're ready to be deployed in real meaningful ways? And we've seen the case in New Jersey. We saw parents and students who were concerned about the fact that climate change wasn't being taught in schools, and that climate science, which is an emerging field where there's, I think, I saw a stat where if we are really committing to the goal of replanting and reaching tree equity nationwide, it will create 3 million jobs in urban forestry, urban and community forestry. And that's 3 million young people that will need to be trained, learned, and be able to be a part of that future. And I think that is what advice I would give is to, if you're interested in computer science, there's a data approach to climate science and how we can track the way in which we are impacting our planet and restoring our planet. It's thinking about art and creativity. How can we tell the story of climate change in a way that reaches beyond language, reaches beyond borders, and it reaches you on just a soul level? Each and every one of us has that expertise by being in a different stakeholder on this planet, that we really can make a difference. Like I've seen young people who are incredible artists and graphic designers tell the climate crisis in a way I've never been able to visualize or speak about it.
Right.
But people walked away from that experience saying, oh, I never thought about that. There was a virtuality experience that was back in 2016 telling the story of a migrant traveling from Guatemala to southern Texas and showing that immigration is not just the issue of numbers. It's about the fact that this isn't an issue at all. It's about the fact that the climate crisis fueled instability in the region. It's about compounding factors, and it's about rehumanizing these issues.
Exactly.
It's like when we look deeper, we think deeper, we are able to just listen to stories and hear how the world can be healed if we're willing to take that step and say, I'm willing to unlearn what I think about the world. I'm willing to unlearn because my school system may have taught me that science and math and English are all separate boxes that you should interact with. But when you go into the real world and you go into the world as an adult, these things aren't separate boxes. They're all interconnected, and we have to learn to be able to think intersectionally in the way that we engage with social movements, because it's not just Black Lives Matter, it's not just women's rights, it's not just voting rights, it's about making sure that each person who may be a Black woman who doesn't have voting rights can then be empowered by that work. It's about being a woman and saying, hey, I'm going to fight for environmental justice. It's being a Black man and saying, I'm going to fight for abortion rights, and all those intersecting issues because the planet needs us to step up.
Yeah.
And not just for the issues that we personally are impacted by, but the issues that may not impact us, but may impact our neighbors. That's what environmental justice is.
It is what environmental justice is. The points that you brought up about, graphic design and different kinds of storytelling, that's why it's so important that people like you are at South by Southwest, so that we can bring those messages into the world of environment and that they can help one another. One of the things, Jerome, that I have learned over the years is, I for many years had mentors that were older than me, whether in academia or elsewhere in my life. And now I have so many people, and I'm including you in that group, young people who have mentored me. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for the work that you do. I'm not going to cry again, everyone. But you have inspired me so much. I'm so glad I got to hang out with you 2 weeks in a row. I've asked everyone for their call to action. What's your call to action for this audience?
My call to action is to keep doing what you're doing. Showing up here was the first step. You're already a part of the change that's happening. It's just figuring out how you are most passionate in making that change. If it's in volunteering with American Forest in Austin, Texas, and Austin Youth River Watch, or with the Forest Congress, or signing up to a newsletter and a food tank and figuring out what that opportunity looks like for you or the neighbors around you, it's doing that thing that empowers you, and you're like, I'm excited to do that. It's not just being called to it because it's just the right thing. It's because also we must come together in a really meaningful way. And I think that's what my call to action is do whatever you can to make good trouble.
I love it, good trouble. Give it up for Jerome. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. I'll take it. Oh my gosh, what a great way to end this 2-day summit. It's been an incredible 2 days. I can't thank you all enough. It's not over. We have a really incredible reception with a DJ and so much music and food and beverages. You'll have that evening sky tour with Dr. Gary Blackwood. And I just need to thank some of our partners. Huston-Tillotson University, they are incredible. Please give them a huge round of applause. We could not have done this without them. South by Southwest, that allows us to have this with, for free for you all without having to have a badge. Give them a round of applause. Driscoll's and Organic Valley made today possible. Give them a round of applause, even if you disagree with some of their practices. Thanks to Her Hospitality for creating such a delicious menu. Round of applause. My food tank team is my family. Bernard Pollock is my brother from a different mother, and I could not do any of this without him. He's a genius, so give him a round of applause. And also Elena Seeley, our content director, Kenzie Wader, our events coordinator, Annie Rubin, our social media coordinator, Jessica Levy, who's one of our fellows, and Sarah Sherburne, who's one of our fellows as well. And we have had a ton of great volunteers over the last few days who deserve our thanks and a big round of applause. And finally, Mode in the back of the room, particularly Andre Martinez, for ensuring today's event ran flawlessly, except for when Danny got emotional. Thank you all who've been watching and spending the day with us. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.